The single dad was at his breaking point, tears streaming down his face as his baby's crying wouldn't stop. Everyone on the plane watched, but nobody helped. Then a 15-year-old girl did something unthinkable. She found the problem in seconds. What happened next left the entire plane in tears of joy. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The hum of the airplane engine filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats for the long flight from Chicago to Denver. Some were reading books, others scrolling through their phones, and a few were already closing their eyes, hoping to catch some sleep during the 3-hour journey. But the peaceful atmosphere was suddenly shattered by a sharp, piercing cry. A baby's wail cut through the quiet cabin like a siren, and heads began to turn. Near the middle of the plane, in seat 14C, a young man in his late 20s sat frozen, his face pale with panic. In his arms was a tiny infant, no more than 4 months old, crying with all the strength his little lungs could muster. The man's name was David Miller, and he was a single father traveling alone with his son, Tommy, for the very first time. David had never felt so helpless in his entire life. David bounced Tommy gently in his arms, trying everything he could think of to calm the baby down. He had fed him before boarding. He had changed his diaper in the airport bathroom. He had given him the pacifier, but Tommy had spit it out almost immediately. Nothing was working. "Shoo, shoo, it's okay, buddy," David whispered, his voice trembling with desperation. "Please, Tommy, please stop crying." But the baby only cried harder, his little face turning red, his tiny fists clenched tight. David could feel the stares from the other passengers. Some looked sympathetic, but others were clearly annoyed. A businessman in the row ahead glanced back with a frown and put on his noise-canceling headphones. Across the aisle, an elderly woman shook her head and muttered something under her breath. David's heart sank. He wanted to explain, to tell them that he was trying his best, that this was his first time doing this alone. But the words stuck in his throat. He stood up and tried walking Tommy up and down the narrow aisle, gently patting his back in a rhythm he had seen his mother do countless times. But his hands felt clumsy and uncertain. Each step he took seemed to make Tommy cry even louder, as if the movement was making things worse instead of better. A young couple in the back row smiled at him encouragingly, but David barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed down to the screaming baby in his arms and the growing sense of failure that was crushing his chest. He tried singing a lullaby, something Sarah used to hum when she was pregnant. But his voice cracked, and the words came out wrong. Tommy didn't seem to recognize it or find any comfort in it. David returned to his seat, exhausted and defeated. His shirt was damp with sweat, and his arms ached from holding Tommy in the same position for so long. He checked his watch. They had only been in the air for 20 minutes. There were still more than 2 hours left in this flight. 2 hours felt like an eternity. He looked down at Tommy, whose little eyes were squeezed shut, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. David felt his own eyes begin to sting. "I'm sorry," he whispered to his son. "I don't know what to do." "Your mom would know. She always knew what to do." David had never imagined his life would turn out this way. Just 8 months ago, he had been married to his high school sweetheart, Sarah. They had been so excited when they found out they were going to have a baby. They had painted the nursery together, picked out the crib, chosen the name Tommy together. David remembered the day they found out they were having a boy. Sarah had cried happy tears and immediately started making lists of all the things they would teach him, all the places they would take him, all the memories they would create as a family. They had been so full of hope and dreams. But everything changed when Sarah developed complications during childbirth. The doctors had tried everything, but in the end, they couldn't save her. Sarah had died just hours after Tommy was born, leaving David alone with a newborn baby and a broken heart. The first few weeks after Sarah's death were a blur. David could barely remember them. He would wake up in the middle of the night to Tommy's cries and forget, just for a moment, that Sarah was gone. He would turn to her side of the bed, ready to ask her what to do, only to find it empty. Those moments of remembering were like losing her all over again. For months, David had barely been able to function. His mother had moved in to help with Tommy, teaching David how to change diapers, how to make bottles, how to soothe a crying baby. She had been patient with him, showing him the same techniques over and over until they became second nature. Slowly, David had learned. He had gotten better at being a father. He could change a diaper in under 2 minutes now. He knew the exact temperature Tommy liked his bottles. He had memorized the schedule of naps and feedings. But knowing the mechanics of childcare and actually feeling confident as a parent were two very different things. His mother couldn't stay forever. She had her own life, her own responsibilities. So when David's brother invited him to Denver for a family gathering, David decided it was time to try traveling with Tommy on his own. It was a test, a way to prove to himself that he could do this. Now, sitting on this airplane with his screaming baby, David was starting to think he had made a terrible mistake. He felt like he was failing the one person who depended on him most. He felt like he was failing Sarah's memory, failing to be the father she had believed he could be. Tommy's cries grew louder and more desperate. David tried rocking him, patting his back, walking up and down the narrow aisle. Nothing helped. A flight attendant approached with a kind smile. "Sir, is there anything I can get for you? Some warm water for a bottle, perhaps?" David shook his head. "I already tried feeding him. He doesn't want it." "Maybe he has an ear infection," the flight attendant suggested gently. "Sometimes the pressure change during takeoff bothers babies." "I don't know," David said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what's wrong." The flight attendant patted his shoulder sympathetically before moving on to help other passengers. David returned to his seat, feeling defeated. Tommy continued to cry, his little body rigid with distress. David held him close, tears now sliding down his own cheeks. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." Several rows behind David, a teenage girl had been watching the entire scene unfold. Her name was Maya Rodriguez, and she was 15 years old. She was traveling alone to visit her grandmother in Denver, and she had been looking forward to a quiet flight where she could listen to music and read her book. But when she heard the baby crying, something stirred inside her. Maya had 7 younger siblings. Her mother worked 2 jobs to support their large family, which meant Maya had spent most of her teenage years helping to raise her brothers and sisters. She knew babies. She understood their cries, their needs, their little signals that most people missed. While other teenagers her age were worried about homework and social media and school dances, Maya had been changing diapers since she was 8 years old. She had learned to recognize the difference between a hungry cry, a tired cry, a scared cry, and a pain cry. She had given up countless Friday nights to babysit while her mother worked late shifts at the hospital. She had missed birthday parties and movie outings with friends because someone needed to watch the kids. Some of her classmates thought she was boring or too serious, but Maya didn't care. Her family needed her. And as she listened to Tommy's desperate wails, Maya recognized something specific in the sound. This wasn't just a fussy baby. This wasn't a hungry baby or a tired baby. This was a baby in real distress, in actual pain. She had heard this exact type of cry before, and she knew it meant something was physically wrong. Maya looked at the young father struggling in his seat. She could see the sweat on his forehead, the trembling in his hands, the tears threatening to spill from his eyes. She recognized that look of helpless desperation. She had seen it on her mother's face more times than she could count, usually in the middle of the night when nothing seemed to work and exhaustion made everything feel impossible. Maya watched as the young father struggled, and her heart went out to him. She could see the exhaustion in his face, the desperation in his movements. She had seen that same look on her mother's face many times. For several minutes, Maya hesitated. She was just a teenager. What business did she have interfering? The man was a stranger. He might think she was being rude or intrusive. He might tell her to mind her own business. After all, she wasn't a doctor or a nurse. She was just a high school student who happened to have a lot of experience with babies. Maya glanced around the cabin. Some passengers were pretending to sleep, clearly hoping someone else would do something. Others were openly annoyed, shooting irritated looks at David. A few looked sympathetic but remained in their seats, probably thinking the same thing Maya was thinking, that it wasn't their place to interfere. But the baby's cries were getting worse, more frantic and desperate. Maya could hear the pain in those cries, and it broke her heart. She thought about her little brother Miguel, who had suffered with a hair tourniquet when he was just 3 months old. She remembered how her mother had blamed herself for not noticing sooner, how guilty she had felt. If Maya could prevent another parent from going through that same guilt, shouldn't she at least try? She took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hands were shaking slightly as she stood up. This was scary, approaching a stranger and offering unsolicited advice. But her grandmother had always taught her that when you have the ability to help someone, you have the responsibility to do so. Maya walked down the aisle toward the struggling father, her heart pounding in her chest. She rehearsed what she would say in her head, trying to find words that wouldn't sound judgmental or presumptuous. "Excuse me, sir," she said quietly when she reached his row. David looked up, startled. His eyes were red, and his face was streaked with tears. For a moment, he just stared at her, probably wondering what this teenage girl wanted. "Yes," he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse from trying to soothe Tommy. Maya bit her lip nervously. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I might know what's wrong with your baby." David blinked in surprise. "You do?" Maya nodded. "I have a lot of younger siblings. I've taken care of babies since I was really young. Can I take a look at him?" David hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He was desperate, and this girl seemed genuinely kind. "Please," he said. "Anything." Maya sat down in the empty seat next to David and gently reached for Tommy. The baby was still crying, his little face scrunched up in misery. Maya carefully examined the baby, checking his hands, his feet, his face. Then she did something that surprised David. She gently pulled off one of Tommy's tiny socks. And there it was. Wrapped tightly around Tommy's smallest toe was a strand of hair, so thin it was almost invisible. The hair had wound around the toe multiple times, cutting off the circulation. The toe was red and swollen. "Oh my God," David breathed, horrified. "It's called a hair tourniquet," Maya explained calmly. "It happens sometimes with babies. A strand of hair or thread gets wrapped around a toe or finger, and it hurts them. He's been in pain this whole time." David's face went pale. "I didn't know. I didn't even think to check." "Most people don't," Maya said kindly. "It's really hard to see." She looked around quickly. "Do you have tweezers or small scissors?" David shook his head, panic rising again. "No, I don't." "What do we do?" Maya thought for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small nail clipper on her keychain. This might work. Very carefully, with steady hands that showed years of experience with babies, Maya worked to unwind the hair from Tommy's tiny toe. It took several minutes of delicate maneuvering, but finally, the hair came free. Almost immediately, Tommy's cries began to soften. Within seconds, the baby's wails turned to whimpers, and then to quiet sniffles. His little body relaxed, and he looked up at Maya with wide, tear-filled eyes. Maya smiled at him gently and handed him back to David. "There you go, little guy. All better now." David took his son in trembling arms, unable to believe what had just happened. Tommy was calm now, making soft cooing sounds, his tiny hand reaching up to touch his father's face. The cabin, which had been filled with tension and noise, was suddenly peaceful again. David looked at Maya, his eyes brimming with tears. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Maya shrugged, a shy smile on her face. It's okay. I'm just glad I could help. How did you know? David asked in amazement. How did you know to check his toe? My little brother had the same thing happen once, Maya explained. He was crying for hours, and my mom couldn't figure out what was wrong. Finally, she took him to the emergency room, and the doctor found a hair wrapped around his toe just like that. Ever since then, whenever a baby cries like that, I always check their fingers and toes first. David shook his head in disbelief. You're a lifesaver. Literally. I was going crazy. I thought I was the worst father in the world. You're not a bad father, Maya said firmly. You're doing your best. That's what matters. Around them, other passengers had been watching the interaction. Several of them were smiling now, and a few even started clapping quietly. The elderly woman who had been annoyed earlier wiped tears from her eyes and gave David a thumbs up. The businessman who had put on his headphones took them off and leaned back. Good job, kid, he said to Maya with genuine respect. Maya blushed, embarrassed by the attention. It was nothing, really. But to David, it was everything. As the flight continued, Tommy fell asleep in David's arms, finally peaceful. Maya stayed in the seat next to David, and the two began to talk. Are you traveling alone? David asked. Maya nodded. Yeah, I'm going to visit my grandma. She lives in Denver. That's where we're going too, David said. My brother lives there. There's a family gathering. They talked for a while about their families, their lives. David told Maya about Sarah, about how hard it had been learning to be a single father. Maya told him about her large family, about how she helped her mother take care of her siblings while going to school. You're really mature for your age, David said with admiration. When I was 15, I was playing video games and avoiding homework. You're taking care of 7 kids. Maya laughed. Well, when you grow up in a big family, you kind of have to grow up fast. But I don't mind. I love my brothers and sisters. David looked down at Tommy, who was sleeping peacefully now, his little chest rising and falling with each breath. Do you think I'll ever be good at this? He asked quietly. Maya looked at him seriously. You already are. You care about your son. You were crying because you couldn't help him. That means you're a good dad. You just need time to learn, that's all. Her words touched David deeply. For months, he had been doubting himself, wondering if he could really do this alone. But this teenage girl, this stranger who had shown such kindness, was telling him he was going to be okay. Thank you, David said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just for helping Tommy, but for saying that. I really needed to hear it. Maya smiled warmly. You're welcome. The rest of the flight passed peacefully. Tommy slept soundly, and David found himself feeling lighter than he had in months. He and Maya talked about music, school, and life. She showed him some pictures of her siblings on her phone, and David showed her photos of Tommy from when he was born. When the plane finally began its descent into Denver, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Maya stood up to return to her own seat. It was really nice meeting you, David. And you too, Tommy, she said, gently touching the baby's sleeping head. Wait, David said, pulling out his phone. Can I get your number? I mean, if it's okay with you. I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe send you some pictures of Tommy as he grows up. And if I ever need parenting advice, you seem like the person to ask. Maya laughed and gave him her number. Sure. And if you ever need someone to babysit when you're in Denver, let me know. I'm pretty experienced, she joked. As Maya walked back to her seat, several passengers stopped her to thank her and congratulate her on her kindness. An older gentleman shook her hand. A mother with 2 children of her own gave her a hug. Maya was embarrassed by all the attention, but she was also proud. She had made a difference today, and that felt good. When the plane landed and passengers began gathering their belongings, David carefully collected Tommy's diaper bag, his stroller, and all the baby supplies that came with traveling with an infant. Tommy was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of all the drama he had caused. As David made his way off the plane, several passengers stopped him to offer encouragement. "You're doing great, young man," the elderly woman said with a warm smile. "Being a single parent is the hardest job in the world, but you've got this." The businessman who had been annoyed at the beginning of the flight approached him as well. "Hey, I'm sorry I was rude earlier. I didn't know your situation. You've got a beautiful son. Hang in there." David thanked them all, feeling a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. At the gate, David saw Maya waiting for her grandmother. He walked over to her with Tommy in his arms. "Maya, I just wanted to say thank you one more time. You changed everything for me today. Not just by helping Tommy, but by showing me that I'm not alone, that there are kind people in the world who will help when you need it most." Maya's eyes glistened with tears. "You're going to be an amazing dad, David. Tommy is lucky to have you." Just then, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes approached. "Mija, there you are," she said, pulling Maya into a hug. "Grandma, this is David and his son Tommy," Maya said, introducing them. "I helped them on the plane." Maya's grandmother looked at David with knowing eyes. "My Maya has always had a gift with babies. She's a special girl." "I know," David said sincerely. "She saved us today." They exchanged goodbyes, and David watched as Maya walked away with her grandmother, chatting excitedly in Spanish about her flight. Over the next few weeks, David kept in touch with Maya. He sent her pictures of Tommy, and she always responded with encouragement and advice. When Tommy had trouble sleeping, Maya suggested a special swaddling technique. When he seemed fussy during feeding, Maya recommended a different bottle nipple. David's family gathering in Denver went well. His brother was impressed by how much David had learned about parenting, and his mother was proud of how independent he had become. But David knew that his confidence came largely from that moment on the airplane, when a teenage girl had shown him kindness and reminded him that he wasn't alone. One day, about a month after their flight, David was at home in Chicago when he received a text from Maya. "Hey David. I just wanted to let you know I got accepted into a special program for high school students interested in nursing. I'm going to start training to become a pediatric nurse. Thanks for reminding me why I want to help people." David stared at his phone, tears in his eyes. He immediately called Maya. "Maya, this is amazing news," he said when she answered. "You're going to be an incredible nurse." "Thanks," Maya said, her voice full of excitement. "I've always loved taking care of babies and kids, but meeting you and Tommy reminded me that it's what I'm meant to do. Seeing how much it meant to you when I helped, that feeling I got from making a difference, I want to feel that every day." "Well, you made a huge difference to us," David said. "Tommy is doing great, by the way. No more hair tourniquets, I check his toes and fingers every day now." Maya laughed. "Good. I'm glad you learned something from me." They talked for a while longer, and when they hung up, David looked at Tommy, who was playing on his blanket on the floor. "You know, buddy," David said to his son, "we met an angel on that plane. And because of her, we're going to be just fine." 6 months after their fateful flight, David and Tommy were doing better than ever. David had found a good rhythm with work and parenting. He had joined a single-parent support group, made friends with other dads, and even started dating again, though he was taking it very slow. Tommy was growing fast, becoming a happy, healthy baby who smiled constantly and rarely cried. David decided to take Tommy to Denver again to visit his brother. And this time, he specifically planned the trip so they could visit Maya. They met at a park on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Maya's grandmother came too, bringing a picnic basket full of homemade food. Maya brought her youngest brother, who was 2 years old, and he and Tommy sat on a blanket together, playing with blocks. "Look how big he's gotten!" Maya exclaimed, picking Tommy up and spinning him around. Tommy giggled with delight, clearly comfortable with Maya. "He remembers you, I think," David said with a smile. "Or maybe he just knows you're someone special." They spent the afternoon together, talking and laughing. David told Maya about his support group and the friends he had made. Maya told him about her nursing program and how she was learning so much. "I think about that day on the plane sometimes," David said as they watched the kids play. "I was at my lowest point. I felt like I couldn't do anything right, like I was failing Tommy every day. But you showed me that I just needed to ask for help, and that people would be there for me." "I think about it too," Maya admitted. "It reminded me that small acts of kindness can change someone's entire day, their entire life even. That's what I want to do with my career. I want to be there for families when they need help the most." David reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you something," he said, handing it to Maya. Maya opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check for $5,000. "David, I can't accept this," she said, trying to hand it back. "Yes, you can," David said firmly. "I know nursing school is expensive. I know your family doesn't have a lot of extra money. This is for your education. Consider it an investment in all the future babies and families you're going to help." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "This is too much." "It's not nearly enough," David said. "You saved my life that day, Maya. You gave me hope when I had none. If I can help you follow your dreams, then that's the least I can do." Maya hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me and my family." "I think I do," David said softly. "I know what it's like when someone helps you when you need it most." Years passed. Tommy grew from a baby into a curious, energetic little boy. David continued to be the best father he could be, always remembering the lessons he had learned on that airplane. Maya graduated from high school with honors and went on to nursing school, using David's gift to help pay for her education. She excelled in her studies, driven by her passion for helping children and families. David and Maya stayed in touch over the years, their friendship growing stronger. David would send her updates about Tommy's milestones, his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. Maya would send David pictures from her nursing rotations, telling him stories about the babies she helped care for. When Tommy turned 5 years old, David decided to throw him a big birthday party. He invited all of Tommy's friends from kindergarten, his family, and of course, Maya. Maya came to the party with a special gift, a children's book about kindness and helping others. Inside the front cover, she had written, "To Tommy, you were one of the first babies I ever helped. May you grow up to be as kind and caring as your wonderful father. Love, Maya." At the party, David made a speech. 5 years ago, I was a scared, lost, new father who didn't know what he was doing. I was on an airplane with my crying baby, thinking I was the worst dad in the world. But then a 15-year-old girl did something unthinkable. She came up to a complete stranger and offered help, not because she had to, but because she cared. That girl, now a nursing student, changed my life and Tommy's life. So I want everyone to raise their juice boxes and sippy cups to Maya, our family's guardian angel. Everyone cheered, and Maya blushed, embarrassed but deeply touched. Later, as the party wound down and kids ran around the backyard, David and Maya sat together watching Tommy play. "He's so much like Sarah," David said quietly. "Same smile, same laugh. Sometimes when I look at him, I see her, and it makes me happy instead of sad." "That's beautiful," Maya said. "You've come so far, David." "We both have," David said. "You're about to graduate nursing school. You're going to help so many families, just like you helped us." Maya smiled. I hope so. Every time I'm with a scared new parent in the hospital, I think about you on that airplane. I remember how much my help meant to you, and it motivates me to be the best nurse I can be. You already are, David said sincerely. The story of David, Tommy, and Maya is a reminder that kindness can come from the most unexpected places. A 15-year-old girl with no obligation to help saw someone in need and chose to act. She didn't worry about whether it was her place to interfere or whether she would be welcomed. She simply saw pain and wanted to help relieve it. Her single act of compassion didn't just solve an immediate problem. It changed the course of 2 lives. David learned to ask for help and to accept it graciously. He learned that struggling doesn't make you a failure, it makes you human. And he learned that his love for his son was enough, even when he didn't have all the answers. Maya learned that her instincts and skills were valuable, that she could make a real difference in people's lives. The confidence she gained from helping David and Tommy helped propel her toward her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse. And Tommy, though he was too young to remember that airplane ride, would grow up knowing the story of how a kind stranger helped his father when he needed it most. That story would shape the kind of person Tommy would become, teaching him the importance of compassion, empathy, and helping others. Sometimes the smallest gestures have the biggest impacts. Sometimes a teenager checking a baby's toe on an airplane can change everything. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to offer help and humble enough to accept it, we discover that we're all connected by our shared humanity and capacity for kindness.